how French people are speaking in their day-to-day lives, which is not necessarily what Nepet and Nicolses recommends. And I like making a good Nicolses sweat in little bits.
I really appreciate your sensitivity to this. I feel very enlightened by it all. I haven't taught this kind of course for a very, very long time. And so this feels very novel and very rich to me. I wasn't aware of a lot of these changes, and it's great. I feel less of an old fogey than I did an hour ago. So I have two things to bring up. One is this strikes me as fitting into a bigger context of well-being. Because this university has, as you pointed out at the end, a lot of resources that individuals who are dedicated to climate, but down to the level of the individual well-being in the classroom. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this initiative. This is a brand new publication. It's a guidebook for well-being, especially dedicated to undergraduates. Have you seen this or heard of it?
Yeah.
So this was an initiative that came out of the School of Education, and it's ongoing. There's representation from liberal arts, electrical engineering, and pharmacy. And in liberal arts, Dean Music, Mary Rose, Music's wife, and our own Heather Petier were on this team. And Heather's pictures in here. So some of the things that you brought up about meeting with students, understanding their needs, not to minimize what you're saying, but transcend the identity and inclusivity issue. And so as a matter of kind of bringing the big picture into focus now, I think what you can very nicely do is to connect what you're doing to a larger picture. This, by the way, we're sending out in PDF form probably tomorrow to our department, and we're getting copies of this to distribute to everyone. I think that your enterprise is all more valuable to the extent that it connects with a larger enterprise. That's one thing. And also, I think that what Carl's talking about having to do with things like gendered language, but how gendered language reflects stereotypes, and how, in fact, there's this connection in some people's minds, a lot of native speakers' minds, between natural gender and grammatical gender, and studies about how people associate grammatical gender and natural gender. And I can imagine that this is something that is actually evolving as well as people's sensitivity to what is sort of a binary versus some other kind of airy representation of identity. I was also just reading something about native speaker use of gesture. And gesture turns out to be actually stereotyped by language, but also it may be evolving as well, depending on what kind of identity you're putting out there with your gesture. And so all of these changes at the intellectual level, social level, linguistic level seem to be exactly consistent with what you're talking about. Things are not standing still. Things are very dynamic. As an emotional comfort matter, as well as a very abstract intellectual matter, this is just fascinating stuff. It's very rich.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like this idea that you were talking about connecting it to kind of a larger concept of well-being. I mean, this is what I do with trauma-informed teaching in large part stems from the idea that when a student enters your humanities classroom, they are not leaving their humanity at the door. They're not leaving their trauma at the door. This stems from a very similar impulse of your students aren't walking into your classroom and leaving their identities at the door.
I have making it a much more inclusive environment in the classroom. While doing that, sometimes one is faced with other students who are not inclusive, who come from backgrounds which have taught them not to be inclusive. How do you deal with the discomfort of those students and make it inclusive for everybody and try to get them on the same page so that it's a conducive classroom?
So I think that there are a couple of possibilities here. I think that one thing that you can do when a student makes a comment that you're uncomfortable with, or that you know that other students in the class might not be comfortable with, one thing that I like to do is re-ground myself in something that feels more concrete. So in discussion classrooms, I think to re-ground yourself in the text, to think about, let's come back to the text and see what the text is telling us. I think in a language classroom, it's doable to do that in terms of culture. To come back, like you were saying, let's come back to how this conversation is being had in these countries, and kind of pulling it back from personal opinions, if that makes sense. I think that helps me. It helps me feel more grounded in something that's concrete, and it helps me feel a little bit more comfortable. But I think it's a really complicated question, and it's a question that I get at almost all of my presentations, especially on trauma-informed teaching. But I also think that it's okay to come back to conversations. I think if you're not sure how to respond to something in the moment, I think it's okay to, I mean, so much of this material, all of the material that I present is always about the students and the students' humanity, but we're human beings too. I think it's important to recognize that and remember that as instructors, and I think it's okay to take a step back and then think about how you want to phrase something and come back to it at the beginning of the next period. Yeah, I think those would be my suggestions.
Just following up on that, I kind of like the part 2 of this talk, because it is a very rich topic, and it's one that people can see right away relevance. But in teaching, you need examples. So I guess what I want, you gave us examples of resources, but I would like to see how you put some of this in action in your class. I was thinking along the lines of how you could teach them about these different categories themselves and how the categories are moving. But it always comes down to, a concrete example. Like, how do you do that? Say, yeah, I'd really like you, I think it'd be fascinating to see. You mentioned your own practices. I'd love to see some of those practices, because I think it would be illuminating.
Video time.
Videos, or, I mean, you're real busy. I'm too busy. You've got other things to do. But
there's also a course that's just started in Columbia. What's the office that used to be Center for Teaching
The
Effectiveness?
Faculty Innovation Center?
The Faculty Innovation Center. They've got a new
amazing.
Canvas course on inclusive teaching in the classroom. I haven't looked at it yet to see what kind of examples may be in there, but of course it'll be more fun.
I want it.
yeah,
You should check it out.
but what
There you
I
go.
want, I'm just very selfish. What I
Okay.
want is you to do it in foreign language, because this is Language Matters series. So
Sure.
it's not a general, I mean, I'm on board with the value of inclusivity, but it's how do you embed that in a language class, because I'm sure that there are people, supervisors will say, well, you can't go off too much of the syllabus, right? You gotta stay.
Sure, oh yeah.
So you have to,
And realistically, we don't have very much time.
yeah, exactly.
Well, this is what I'm working on. I work at the international office. I teach English to international students who are trying to improve their English to be able to come to be real university students here. And so I've been thinking about, for our students and populations who may not even know about binary, non-binary, they don't even know about this option, how to present this, how to include it somehow, not somebody say, okay, you must do this or you must make this choice, but just to know that this is out there. And so I came here to get some ideas for that, and I've got some ideas, thank you. And I think my way in will be to use the article that was in the Daily Text from last week that said that professors now can include on their syllabus a statement about if you want to tell them what pronoun to use, we can do that. And just let them know that this sort of thing is possible. This discussion is actually happening, the language is evolving. The question of whether you can use they, with a singular verb following it in English. Because we're not just talking about what's going on in other languages, it's how is it changing in English as well.
Sure.
So it's just kind of finding different ways in. But yes, if she can come to part 2, I will be.
Speaking of how you teach, I have a question about assessment, and especially if it's a multi-section course, which I presume some of yours are. So you let someone use a new pronoun, different pronoun that's non-standard, not traditional. What about in a test? Is that person allowed then to use that pronoun in very personalized questions, present, a kind of setup where the person's supposed to describe a day or an opinion or have behaviors? And is that then, is that going to be the right answer? Is that going to be correct?
Sure.
How does one take it to the next level to really incorporate it into what's assessed course material?
So in exams or in conversation during class, absolutely. I think what it comes down to in terms of assessment is having a conversation with the student at the beginning of the semester so that you can understand and that you can establish together what's expected, what they feel comfortable with. And there are lots of options, and they can just choose an option, right? So an option that I would be perfectly happy with is I'm not comfortable using only masculine pronouns or only feminine pronouns. I'm going to alternate between the two. That's fine with me. I'm going to grade your paragraph in one sentence. You're making feminine agreements, and your next sentence you're making masculine agreements. All you're doing is giving yourself even more practice, if anything else. If you've decided that you want to use something that's really that is gender neutral, then we've probably had a conversation about how you're going to do those agreements on an exam or in any kind of written situation. So I would absolutely accept so many different options. In terms of assessment, it would just be about us having had a conversation about, grammar and expectations.
Just following up on your response, can I throw something in? While I think it's great to accept many different options, you might want to reconsider about things like the paragraph, because I get a lot of students who use it as a cop-out when they're getting their genders mixed up. So for me, it would be you choose which one you want for that particular essay and stick to that. In another one, you can come back with another, but within a paragraph or sentences. Because then it's like, I was actually trying to be inclusive. That's why I was getting my genders all mixed up. So you might want to rethink that a little bit.
I get this comment a lot in my trauma-informed teaching presentations too, about students are going to take advantage of you. And at the end of the day, the students who are going to take advantage of you are going to take advantage of you in whatever way that they figure out to take advantage of you. But also at the end of the day, their language abilities kind of are what they are, and if they got a point because they can argue that they wanted to make that agreement in the feminine, that they did that intentionally, that's probably not going to bump their grade up from a C+ to an A. That's been my experience. But yeah, absolutely, alternating between paragraphs or assignments or
Yeah.
I would say that you talk about having conversations with the students. If you've had conversations with the students, then you know that maybe this is something that they do, and so it's not like students taking advantage of you, just saying, I've decided I'm going to, not conform.
Right, spontaneously.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But you've probably had conversations with you, and you know that that's something that they feel comfortable doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think we had one more question up here.
Well, it's not a question, but I was just thinking, Tom asked about, so how you find materials for something that just isn't out there very much. And I had, last year I had a request from a student in an intermediate class. We were doing, young adults with families and marriage customs. And he really wanted to see an example of a gay marriage, which is legal in the culture and teaching. And, and then he went and they had made another assignment where they had to do interviews with native speakers, and he interviewed a gay friend, Turkish guy living in Paris, and they had a big interview about his gay marriage. And I thought, wow.
Mhm.
I was like, okay, I think sometimes
Mhm.
looking to the diaspora community
Right.
is a good place to find sort of, non-talked about subjects.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's super important in terms of, the diaspora community, and also not leaving out all of those countries that speak our language that we don't talk about. Those conversations are happening differently for those speakers depending on where they are in the world. So yeah, absolutely.
There's one more question.
Okay, sorry.
Please.
I've been teaching English for about 15 years back in my country, in Turkey. And I really like the idea of not leaving a student out or behind. And I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for the presentation, by the way. And I've always liked the idea of bringing authentic material in the class. This is perfect. But the issue is actually when you try to bring some authentic material in, it is always a problem. Selection is always a problem. And if you don't feel like the member of a certain group, it can be a bit difficult to appreciate the value of the authentic material. And how can I, for example, I faced such situations back in my country, and it's conservative, and I taught in a more conservative community, mostly they speak Kurdish. And I had transgender students because they felt and found it easy to come to me and talk about it. And I had difficulty to include them and also find some authentic material to relate them to the class. How can it be easier for teachers who cannot feel themselves as a member of a certain community?
Yeah, and you're saying that you weren't able, that it was really difficult to find material from outside resources on those topics too?
I found it difficult to find the appropriate material for those students, and think that the class population is over 80 students.
Okay, yeah. If it's possible, I feel like my response is always to have a conversation with the student about the reality of the situation in that culture. Have a conversation that's kind of explaining why there are so few resources, and offering them options, and then asking about if they have suggestions about what might make them feel more included in the class. I think that's my best suggestion.
Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much for getting us going on this conversation. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much. It's terrific.